Welcome to 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership. In this special 5-part series, we take a look at the book recently released by General Stanley McChrystal, Jeff Eggers, and Jason Mangone, entitled Leaders, Myths, and Reality. But first, a word from our sponsor. Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? With the expansion of the Compliance Podcast Network, I am looking for a new podcast. If you've wondered how to get going on a podcast, a word from our sponsor, One Stone Creative.
If you are enjoying this show, you might enjoy hosting your own. As an expert in your field, you have skills, knowledge, and insight that can help you expand your practice, meet new people, and create amazing content to share with the world. In as little as 2 hours a week, you can dramatically change how you promote, fill, and position your business. And One Stone Creative can show you how. Learn more at onestonecreative.net.
In this special podcast series, Richard Lummis and I take a look at leadership styles from General McChrystal's book. They include the founders, Walt Disney and Coco Chanel, the geniuses, Albert Einstein and Leonard Bernstein, the heroes, Zheng He and Harriett Tubman, the power brokers, boss Tweed and Margaret Thatcher, and the reformers, Martin Luther and Martin Luther King Jr. In this part 3, we take a look at the heroes, Zheng He and Harriett Tubman. 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership, is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to another episode of 12 O'Clock High, a podcast about leadership. It's Richard Lummis. I'm here with Tom Fox for another discussion on how to improve our leadership skills. We believe leadership is a skill which can be improved with study of both good and bad practices, and we try to draw interesting examples from many sources, including history, fiction, film, and business writing. Welcome back, Tom.
Thank you, Richard.
Today we're continuing our exploration of Stanley McChrystal's book, Leaders, Myth, and Reality, with a discussion from his chapter that he titles Heroes. And he said he had significant trouble picking only two, but he ended up choosing, I thought, two very interesting ones. One is the Chinese Admiral Zheng He, which is also I've seen as Ching Ho, so I'm sure I'm butchering both pronunciations. And then the second one was Harriett Tubman. So what did you think about this choice, Tom?
Well, Richard, actually I went in a little bit different direction because when I read the chapter title, I thought even more than geniuses, heroes make very poor leaders. At least in the business setting over the long term. Either you have to have a last stand at the Alamo or you have to take that town, then a hero can be a good leader. But in terms of a long-term, past quarterly perspective, I really didn't think of a hero as a leader, but he had, and the Zheng He example, well, I should say both of these stories I thought were a great history. Mm-hmm. And Harriett Tubman is well known to me, I think probably of most Americans my age. We have some familiarity with her, having studied her. I remember studying her in elementary school. And I learned how to tell north from south from her story about where the moss grew on trees. Yeah. From her journeys on the Underground Railroad. But I did not know Zheng He anything about him. I knew of his naval missions, but I was not aware of him. So it was great history, and I should say the entire book is great biography and great history as well. But the hero's journey, McChrystal characterized it as separation, initiation, and return. It's setting forth into the unknown, emerging victorious, and then returning. If that sounds like a movie screenplay, there's a reason for that, because that's Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces. Mm-hmm. And that's the myth that's really common to all cultures of the hero's journey. And it is within the context of the hero's journey that they become a leader. And this is one of the things we've touched on in a couple of the other episodes around the McChrystal book, and I suspect we will do in subsequent episodes, is what seems like creative genius, what seems like magic, what seems like someone coming out of nowhere. It's not magic, it's a process. And whether it was Walt Disney in his 10-year journey to creation of Snow White, whether it was Coco Chanel in her creation of her both perfume and clothing empire, whether it was the genius of Einstein in synthesizing the thoughts and theories in place at time into one for special relativity, or Leonard Bernstein in his ability to connect with popular culture with dead white men's music of symphonies. That was none of those were products of magic. They were products of people who worked very hard. They were really at the top of their games in those fields, but they paid their dues. Then you move to when right place, right time, and it's certainly one thing for you and I to see an opportunity arise and take a step through it. My personal journey of having been laid up from a bicycling accident and having nothing on my hands but time led me to dabbling in social media, which led to where I am today in terms of my own podcast network. That was probably one of the clearest times I could point to where I walked through a door and the opportunity was in front of me. It was not genius. It was really not even inspiration. It was just being able to see an opportunity and take advantage of it because of where I was at that point in my life. If I hadn't been laid up or I couldn't work, I couldn't leave the house, I might not have done that. But with the hero is someone who at a specific time, at a specific place, can grasp an opportunity and take that opportunity and take it in such a way that it truly inspires others. But let me now emphasize the others part of that, because McChrystal makes clear that a leadership of a hero is the right person at the right time, but surrounded by people who enable their activities and find meaning in what they have to offer. And Harriett Tubman was certainly that. She took slaves out of the South, largely in Maryland. I for some reason thought she was from the Deep South. If she had been from the Deep South, I don't think she would have been able to accomplish what she did. But she took slaves out of Maryland all the way through the North, the rest of the United States, up into Canada. And she did that multiple times. And she was the lead conductor on that railroad. And she went up and back and up and back. And she didn't go up and back. She went up in the winter when darkness came earlier, more dark, less fugitive slave hunters out. And then after she got to Canada, she would go back to New England and she would actually work as a domestic or give speeches to try to raise money to fund her next venture. So it was a year-long cycle for her, and each part of the cycle had a different purpose, whether it was working to raise money, whether it was fundraising to raise money, whether it was actually taking people on the Underground Railway. In the case of Xingxi, he was able to project the power of the Chinese emperor through largely trade. Whereas if you contrast with, I guess you would probably point to the Portuguese, were the first who came around the Cape of Good Hope and then into the Indian Ocean and up the Indian coast. They really negotiated with arms first.
Yeah.
And the Chinese could have done that under Xingxi, but didn't. And they were able to set up a large number of trading posts for the benefit of the empire, of the Mongol emperor. And so he was able to synthesize his training as a military officer and having worked in the bureaucracy of the Chinese Mongol emperor, I think for 20 years at that point. So you had the right person, at the right time with the right opportunity, but surrounded by a group of people that not only enabled them to engage in this heroic activity, but found meaning in what they were doing.
Yeah. Well, I thought he's a fascinating character. And when you look at the level of technology the Chinese were able to bring to their fleet, they're far superior to what was available in the West at the time. But it really didn't have any long-term effect because of internal politics in China.
Right.
So I thought he was a particularly peculiar choice. except I guess to get us out of our Western-centric frame of mind. Tubman, I think, was certainly heroic. I thought it was interesting he chose her instead of Frederick Douglass, but she was far more active in actually helping other slaves escape rather than simply proselytizing on the political side of abolition. So I can see why she was chosen. As for the hero's journey, it's always something that I remark on that tends to work out okay for the hero, but not usually for his companions. When you think about starting with the Odyssey, I don't think a lot of Odysseus got home alive. So.
That's true, and sidekicks don't always turn out so well.
Yeah, but so I do think this is another example, as with the geniuses, where it's an interesting historical lesson, and it's fun to think about, but I'm not sure how much application it actually has in terms of the business context of making yourself a hero.
I guess I would just say that it made me think, and it made me think about really the components of the hero, of being at the right place at the right time, but also the importance of the process, or even the business system around each one of them, if I can call it that,
Yeah.
which allowed them to succeed and be viewed as what you and I today might consider a hero. Once again, you're only as good as your financial controls.
Well, on that note, Richard Lummis and Tom Fox signing off from another episode of 12 O'Clock High.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership. I hope you'll join Richard Lummis and myself again, where we take a look at another set of leaders from the recent book by General Stanley McChrystal and his co-authors, and take a consideration of how they can help you in your leadership for business going forward. 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership, is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network.